Hello, and welcome to this tutorial, which is the first episode of a new series where I explore how to develop FiveM mods. Today I will demonstrate how to set up a FiveM server and create your own FiveM resource in C#. We'll be going over all the necessary steps required to create a C# resource, and to start off we're going to need a few things first. We're going to need the FiveM client, the FiveM server, and an IDE of your choice. And for this video we're going to be using Visual Studio 2017. You can find download links for all the requirements in the description below. I also recommend that anyone who is following this tutorial has a basic understanding of object-oriented programming or prior experience with C#, as some of the concepts covered may be foreign or hard to understand for beginning programmers. Now let's set up the FiveM server. If you're familiar with how to set up a FiveM server, get to this timestamp here. First, go to the FiveM website and click the download server link. Once the page is downloading, click on the artifacts link. Select the latest server folder and download the server.zip file. Once it is done downloading, open the archive and extract the folder to a new directory called FiveM Server. Now that the files are done extracting, go back to the FiveM Server website, click on the FiveM Server data link, and it will direct you to GitHub. Now click on the green button labeled Clone or Download, and then select Download Zip. Now go back to your FiveM directory and create a new folder called FiveM Server Data. Now open the archive and extract the resource folder in the archive into this directory. Now let's set up the server config. Go back to the FiveM Server website once more, and copy the server config template it gives you. Go back to the FiveM Server data folder and create a new text document and label it server.cfg. Now edit the server config file and paste what you just copied from the website over to here. Let's go over the different variables in the server config. This variable allows you to disable script hook, which is used by client-sided trainers such as Lambda. We will not be using Lambda anytime in this series. This variable allows you to change your server name, which will show up in the public server list, as well as applications such as Discord or Steam. This variable disables the server from showing up in the public server list, which will prevent people from connecting your server without your IP. Now these two variables are not required, but they will prevent people from connecting your server without Steam or Social Club running. Now the last variable is the server license key, which is required to run the FiveM server. To get the license key, go to keymaster.fivem.net and sign into FiveM. Once you're signed in, you should be prompted with a list of your keys and the option to create a new key. Click on Register and add a label for your server. Since mine is hosted locally, I'll just name it localhost. Once you're finished putting in the information, click Generate, and then copy the key you just created. Head back over to the server config and replace change me with your server license key. Now let's create the bash script to run the FiveM server. Go to your FiveM Server data folder, create a new text document, and name it run.bat. Right-click and edit the file. You can type what I'm typing now, or copy-paste the bash script I've linked in the description below. Save the file, and then run the batch script. Your FiveM server should be up and running now. Now that we have the server running, start the FiveM client and connect to your server. You may notice that on the first run, you get an error saying that it couldn't load the resource session manager. To fix this, go into your server config, and at the end of the file, add restart session manager and save the file. Once you've saved your config, restart your server and you should be able to connect to your server now. As we can see, FiveM is running normally with all the default resources loaded. Now that we have the FiveM server running, we need to set up our environment in Visual Studio so we can finish writing our resource. First, open up Visual Studio and create a new project. Since this resource will give us all weapons, we're going to name it Weapon Spawner. Make sure that the project type you have selected is a class library using the .NET framework. Now that our project is set up, right-click References and select Add a Reference. We're going to need to reference the FiveM client so we can use the FiveM API. Type this directory into your Windows Explorer, and once you've done that, select the citizenfx.core.dll as your reference. Next, we're going to have the class extend base script, which is the skeleton for all C# resources in FiveM. This will allow FiveM to load the resource into the server. Now we're going to add a constructor, which is going to be the first thing that runs when FiveM loads our resource. And in our constructor, we're going to add a tick callback, which is a method that's going to be called back multiple times per second. Now since this method is going to be running over the course of multiple ticks, we're going to make it asynchronous. So in order to give a player weapon, we need to reference the player ped, which is the player controlled character, and give that the weapon. And the method that we're going to be using is playerped.weapons.give. Now since this method can only take one weapon value at a time, we're going to iterate over all the weapon hash values and pass that value to the give method. For a test like this, we're going to use a for each loop and get the values through enum.getValues. Now the values we're going to pass to the method is going to be the weapon hash, 250, which is going to be our ammo count, and 2 booleans. The first one's going to be false, which means that it's not going to equip the weapon, and the second one means that it's going to load the ammo into the clip. Now we only want to give the weapon to the player if the player does not have it, so we'll need to check if the player has a weapon first before giving it to them. To do this, we're going to use a condition before we execute the give method. Now the condition we're going to check is going to be playerpad.weapons.hasWeapon. So by inverting it, we're checking if the player doesn't have the weapon. If they do not have the weapon, give them the weapon. So now that we have the basic logic for our code set in place, let's wrap it in a try-catch exception clause just in case if it fails. We're going to use debug.writeLine to write to the console, which you can open up with F8 in console or check your FiveM application data where it's saved as citizeneffects.log. Now the last thing we're going to add is a delay so this doesn't run every tick. Now by adding await basescript.delay and by setting the parameters to 5000, this means it will wait 5000 milliseconds before the delay is done and moves on to the next tick. Now to recap on the code that we have so far, when the weapon spawner is created, add a callback to the tick method, which will then execute this code right here, and it will iterate over every value for the weapon hash, check if the player doesn't have that weapon, and if they don't have the weapon, give them the player with 250 ammo count. Then wait 5 seconds before executing once more. Now that we have our code set up, let's finish setting up the resource. Navigate to your FX Server Data Resource folder and create a new directory for the resource. Then enter the directory and create a new text document titled __resources.lua. Now edit this file and put in client_scripts and leave it blank for now. Go back to your resource file, select and copy the absolute path to this directory. Now go back into Visual Studios and open up Properties. Now once it is open, change your assembly name to your resource name .net. And once that is set, go to your build events. Now under the post build event command line, type in the commands that I'm typing in right now and then copy paste your absolute path as the target directory. And make sure that your directory has a / tailing it. Now this post build script just takes the project you just built and moves it into the resource class so you don't have to move it each time. Now go under build and then build your solution, and once it is finished building, you could go back to your resource directory and you should notice that there's now a DLL file in there. Now let's go back to our resource.lua script and then enter our DLL file name into the client script parameter. Now save this file and go back to your server config where we're going to add our resource to the list to start. So for this, create a new line and then put in start and whatever file you named your directory. And in this case, we used weapon spawner. Now once you save the file, let's restart FiveM and hop into the client. Now that we've loaded into the game, we can see that we have all the weapons available with the proper amount of ammunition. Now do keep in mind this script is nothing special, it's just to demonstrate how to create your first FiveM resource in C#. Thanks for watching this video. This video wouldn't have been possible if it weren't for my patrons over at Patreon. As an incentive for supporting me, I post early access videos and mods over there, such as this map mod for Mirror Park, or this interior in the Vespucci Canals. If you come across any issues, make sure to leave a comment below or join our Discord to get help from our awesome community. And if you like this video, make sure to subscribe for future videos where I go over FiveM resource development. Again, thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.